Hi, everyone. Why don't we get started? As people will filter in, they'll get to listen to different parts of my introduction. So thank you for joining the Green Chemistry Connections today. This is our January Connections. We have a very exciting lineup of speakers. So without further ado, I will go through my intro and then we can get to the talks. And so for a brief structure of today, what's going to be happening is in the first hour of the connection, we'll hear from our speakers. And then in the second hour of the connection, we'll hear from all of you as the community members in breakout room discussions. So stay tuned for that. And so hi, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Nimrat. I'm a program manager for higher education at Benign. And I'm the host of today's Connections. You can find me on Twitter, or that's my email there as well. And behind the scenes today, we have Juliana Vidal, who's our graduate student liaison, who will be doing all of the behind the scenes magic that we can't see. So if at any point during the Connections you have a question, please feel free to message either myself or Juliana in the chat, and we'll help you out. So before going, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this unceded land on which Beyond Benign operates. And for years, it has been the traditional land of the Pawtucket and Massachusetts nations. We do acknowledge the painful history of genocide, colonialism, and forced removal from this territory. And we also acknowledge that further education is needed on our part to learn the full history of the land we occupy and all the Indigenous peoples it belongs to. Presently, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous nations across Turtle Island, and we honor, respect, and celebrate the diversity of peoples that are connected to this land. And because we're all coming together in a virtual space today, we do acknowledge that us and our attendees occupy unceded land and territories belonging to Indigenous nations across the world. And in terms of what Beyond Benign is doing, we are committing ourselves to education, to supporting Indigenous communities, and decolonizing our organization practices, programs, and activities. And we do encourage our attendees today to do the same. If you would like to learn a little bit more about how we constructed our land acknowledgement and the resources that we used, there is a link there at the bottom of the slide, and these slides will be made available after the Connections too. So a couple more logistical notes for today before we get into things. You might see that some of us have our pronouns in our display names. Those are those two words in brackets. What they are is just words to show how we identify ourselves or how we want to be referred to by somebody else. And it is important to use the ones that others want us to use. So I've written some examples down here. I will say some people use more than one set of pronouns, and a good example is me. I actually go by they, them pronouns, and I also go by she, her pronouns, and I use those interchangeably. And then some folks don't use pronouns at all. And I've written some kind of guidelines here. If you'd like to describe your own pronoun, you can say, please use she, they for me. That's how I would say it to somebody else. You can also ask for someone else's by asking what pronouns can I use for you? And if you don't know someone else's pronouns, it's usually best just to use their name until you can get the chance to ask them. And if you accidentally use the wrong pronoun for someone, that's okay. Just apologize briefly and then use the correct ones moving forwards. And again, if any of you are interested in learning a bit more about that, I've written some resources down here at the bottom of the slide, and you can feel free to take a look. If you would like to put your pronouns in your Zoom display name now, what you can do is you can hover over those three dots in the corner of your own window. And if you click on that, that should come down with a drop-down menu. And if you hit rename, then you can just type in your pronouns to the end of your display name. And that way people will know how to refer to you. There are also some guidelines there for putting your pronouns into your Zoom display name permanently, which is what I've done. And you can feel free to follow those as well from the slides. The last thing I want to mention is that a transcript of this meeting will be made available. And so if you would like to hear or see rather live subtitles, then you can go to the bottom of your Zoom window and click this button that says CC live transcript. And as the speakers are talking, you should see subtitles at the bottom of your screen that have written down what they're saying. And so all of you will have seen this code of conduct when registering for the event. I will not go through the entire thing, but please keep in mind that these events, we expect professional, respectful, and considerate conduct from all of you. And as a general guideline, when you're during the Q&A or in the networking sessions, please make sure that everyone has ample time to kind of say what they would like to say and everyone's getting equal talking time. So a little bit about Beyond Benign first. Again, for those of you who might be new to the Connections, we're a nonprofit that's dedicated to fostering a green chemistry education community, specifically to empower educators to transform chemistry education for a sustainable future. And we really try to hit all of the kind of educational spectrum, all the way from K-12 to out-of-school programs throughout undergrad or college, grad school, and then also into the workforce as well. And we were founded in 2007 by Dr. John Warner and Dr. Amy Kennan, who's on the call today. Another thing I wanted to mention is our 25 by 25 initiative, where Beyond Benign is really aiming to pursue partnerships with colleges and with universities in the US to ensure that 25% of all the students graduating with a chemistry degree have a background in green chemistry by 2025. Really instilling the importance of green chemistry education throughout that educational spectrum. And so currently we are sitting at around 10% of graduating chemists are getting this kind of education, and we'd like to push further. And this is part of our larger program, the Green Chemistry Commitment Program, which is an agreement or a commitment that institutions can sign that shows their dedication to adopting the following green chemistry principles and student learning objectives into their departments. And so that's based on 4 different areas: theory, learning green chemistry principles; toxicology, learning about hazards and designing chemicals with human health and the environment in mind; lab skills; and then application. So really applying those green chemistry skills to serve society. And currently we have around 89, 90 signers globally, and we're looking to grow even more. So if you are interested at all in learning more about the green chemistry commitment, please don't hesitate to reach out. And Juliana has also popped a link in the chat that you can follow to investigate further. And on that note, please join us in welcoming our 2 latest signers of the Green Chemistry Commitment. We have the Federal University of Pelotas in Brazil, and also the University of Colorado Springs in the United States. And their who's committed profiles that you can see on our Beyond Benign website, those will be coming soon. So stay tuned for those. We're in the process of setting those up. Last note for today, we are on social media, so please join the conversation online. Feel free to engage with us on Twitter. Our handle is there. The wonderful Juliana will be live tweeting about the Green Chemistry Connections. So if you are Twitter inclined, please feel free to jump on and engage or retweet or use these hashtags. Or you can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So please don't hesitate to use those avenues to reach out as well. Okay, so without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Andy Dix and Ken Hoffman as our first speakers. To give a short introduction, Andy Dix is a professor at the University of Toronto in the teaching stream, and he joined in 1997, and he's also the undergraduate associate chair. His research interests are in undergraduate laboratory instruction that involve designing novel and stimulating experiments, particularly those that showcase green chemistry principles. When I was at U of T, I also had the opportunity to work with Andy, and I would say that it was really, really fun time. And that's personally how I came to learn more about green chemistry as well. Ken Hoffman is a lead teacher with us at Beyond Benign. And prior to teaching chemistry, Ken was a research chemist and a freelance musician. And as a world traveler, he now calls Calgary home with his wife and 2 children. And so I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I will invite either Andy or Ken to share their screen and to begin.
Thank you, Nim. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, all good.
Great. And thank you so much for the invitation to speak to everybody today. And thank you for attending When Ken and Andy Met, mentoring green chemistry educators and being in Nexus. Nim did a nice job of introducing us, so I'll just launch into the next slide. So I have a land acknowledgement as well. I'm speaking to you today from the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. It's just across the border, about 5 hours north of Montana, which is largely the same Indigenous area. This includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Piikani, Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, Stoney Nakoda, Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations, and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. I think it's really important that we do this in general, of course, but specifically when we're talking about sustainability themes, that we acknowledge those who've lived sustainably on the land for millennia. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Ken. I would also like to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Okay, so Ken and I are going to co-present today, and the discussion that we're hoping to have with you is as follows. We're going to start with an example of networking outside of higher education, and from the title, really give you a perspective of how we met and the sort of activities that we've been involved in, some green chemistry ones, but some non-green chemistry ones as well. We want to speak a bit about why we think building a green chemistry network outside of higher education is very important, and cover the benefits of doing so. Some of those would be benefits to you as educators. Some would be benefits to teachers, benefits to students, and benefits to society in general. Recognizing that some of you will be doing some of this already, and we know are doing some of this already. And we're going to really frame that as really as an appeal, and mention some actions that Ken and I have been working on specifically, and end with a bit of a how-to. How might you get involved in starting small with a network and potentially building a larger one? Okay, so just a bit of background on Ken and I. If we go back over 10 years, Ken was teaching in Hungary at the American International School there, and thinking about coming home to Canada. And I was at the U of T as an associate professor in the teaching stream. We actually met the following year in 2012 at a networking event, a students awards night at the University of Toronto. And at the time I was heavily involved in the Canadian Chemistry Olympiad and the Ontario Provincial Chemistry Olympiad programs. I invited Ken to participate in those and to work with me in mentoring students and training them for local and national and international competitions. Our mutual interest in green chemistry really came about, though, in 2014, when we both attended the BCCE, the Biennial Conference on Chemistry Education that year was held at Grand Valley State University. And I mentioned to Ken, come and see John Warner speak. And probably everyone who's on the call today has heard John and the enthusiasm that he imparts around green chemistry and the education side of things. And that was certainly, I think I'm speaking for Ken, but an inspirational speech given by John that we both heard about. And for a number of years, Amy and I have collaborated on various activities. Ken and Amy met at a College Chemistry Canada conference in 2018. And a couple of years after that, Ken and I collaborated on writing a paper together, largely on Ken's work that he had been doing at his high school regarding greening the high school chemistry curriculum there, particularly from a lab perspective, and I'll mention the article that we wrote in a few minutes' time. Just to give you a perspective, Canada is a very, very large country, and I'm located in Toronto. Ken is located in Calgary. We met in Toronto, and eventually we've had to conduct a lot of our collaborations and so on online through Zoom, certainly throughout the pandemic. The size of Canada certainly creates some challenges in terms of networking. We have a 2-hour time difference, which isn't that great, but if you go from the far east of the country to the far west of the country, it's over 5,000 kilometers. There's a 5.5-hour time difference, and the population of Canada is actually smaller than the population of the state of California. So this creates, I think, some barriers sometimes towards collaborations and communications, and there's little tendency sometimes to gather regionally in large numbers within Canada. Not always the case, but sometimes that can be the case. So this is really how we first started interacting, and I mention it because we were networking through the Chemistry Olympiad a number of years ago. These are students that we went to Azerbaijan in 2015 for the ICHO event there. And we were very, very interested at the time in building relationships, certainly between each other, but between students, between teachers and higher education, faculty, and so on, and giving people opportunities really to grow. Of course, we were interested in the competition side of things, but more than anything else, we were acting as coaches and giving people an opportunity to be the best that they can be. And this is, I think, a real motivation for what we've moved into in terms of green chemistry and how we've moved forward in that regard. So this is the paper that we ended up co-writing a couple of years ago. It's published in Sustainable Chemistry and Pharmacy. And it's all really focused on work that Ken has done at his high school, at the high school level. And we can certainly share it with you. It's not an open access, unfortunately. We can share it certainly with anyone who's interested. It's really about what sort of lab work can students do in the realm of green chemistry without just following a recipe. What sort of hypotheses can they test? Can they learn about green chemistry metrics at an introductory level and move beyond the sort of standard metric of reaction yield, which we tend to teach as being the gold standard for measuring the efficiency of a reaction. So we were happy to work on that together. From a University of Toronto perspective, we have been teaching green chemistry in one way or another for about 15 or 20 years, and we've tried to embed principles throughout our curriculum. More recently, we have been involved in collaborating with the GC, Beyond Benign. We can see that we joined the green chemistry commitment in 2016. That was a huge game changer for us as a department. If your department hasn't signed on to the GCC, I highly recommend that you do. We've tried to, in more recent times, develop green chemistry within our inorganic chemistry curriculum. Previously, it was in organic and general chemistry. And we have developed what we call a focus in green chemistry, where this is built into students' programs. If they take a certain number of courses, this appears on their transcript without us having a major in green chemistry. We don't have that or specific courses in green chemistry. We have the approach where we build it in throughout the curriculum of the students. So I'm going to hand over to Ken, back to Ken now for a bit.
Got it, Andy. Thanks. You want to just give that a click here. I'm just going to talk a bit briefly a bit more about that timeline that Andy just discussed and how it represents an example of what many of you are already doing Many of you, maybe some of you are thinking of establishing a broader network across the various levels of education, or maybe it just never occurred to you that you could have this sort of impact. So as Andy mentioned, the green chemistry commitment was a foundational initiative in green chemistry education at the University of Toronto. And also I want to draw attention to the green chemistry initiative as well, which I believe, Andy, was a student initiative. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Nim and Jonathan Moyer were involved in that student organization. Through this green chemistry commitment and the greening of the labs at the University of Toronto, Andy's mentored several people, including 2 faculty members, Barb Mora and John DeBaker. And so what this is, what this has accomplished is served as this pipeline to Beyond Benign of talent, and Beyond Benign has in turn provided remarkable support for us to continue building these connections. I am absolutely positively here today speaking to you because of this network that Andy has been working and developing at the University of Toronto. If you want to go to the next slide there, Andy. And lest and many of you are already doing this, and lest you think this is like a one-off. And I'm going to defer to Jane and Cassie later, but this is largely what's been happening at the University of Minnesota as well. Here we have Jane Wissinger at the center of this network, and Cassie Knudsen, who's a certified lead teacher through Beyond Benign, who is part of the Research Experience for Teachers program and worked with Jane in her labs during the summer. Cassie Javner, who will be presenting as well, and a current Beyond Benign lead teacher, Nina Meltzer, who is a student of both Jane and Cassie Knudsen at the University of Minnesota. So again, we see this post-secondary educator with a commitment to green chemistry at the center of this burgeoning and expanding network, which is supported and fostered through Beyond Benign. Thanks, Andy. You want to head there? And so here's an example of something that Jane and her mentees, the 2 Cassies, have accomplished. This is something I pulled off the University of Minnesota website. They're just being acknowledged for an ACS award for incorporating sustainability into chemistry education. So, this is happening at a grassroots level, but it's impactful in it's reverberating and rippling out into the various levels of education and the community. If you want to go ahead there, Andy. So I was thinking of what are we talking about, and what jargon could I use? What word could I apply to this function that Andy is fulfilling and Jane is fulfilling in the green chemistry education community? And so I came up with this nexus, this center point through which people reach in and reach out, from which the network grows. So at the end of this presentation, there will be an appeal for many of you to partake in this journey, and many of you already are, and maybe it's just a matter of talking to others who are doing similar things. The appeal is, and fully acknowledging that many of you are doing this already, and I would love to hear about your experience, and maybe you've got some advice that you can provide us, that through Beyond Benign, through this green chemistry connection, we can help you build a network to teachers in your community, students in your institution, and the community, to build this pool of talent that's necessary to deliver on this vision that John Warner spoke of so compellingly in 2014. Okay, so I think the important thing here that Andy, the point he wanted to make is that the importance of reciprocal mentorships rather than hierarchical mentorships. And I can say through all my interactions with everybody in the green chemistry community as a high school teacher, I've definitely been treated as a peer, which has really allowed me to make a more substantial contribution. And I think Andy would say that there are certain aspects of green chemistry education, certainly green chemistry pedagogies that have emerged from his interaction with me and my background in working with younger learners. And one of the things that that's become apparent to us over the years is that introducing students to green chemistry in college and universities is much, much too late, that it needs to be more foundational. It needs to be embedded in curricula right down into the primary years. What's another role for you as a Nexus, as a mentor to high school teachers is supporting them in their pedagogical content knowledge development. That is, what is peculiar about teaching chemistry? And this slide, I came across this data from a Greg Rushton presentation at the BCCE in 2014. And as post-secondary educators, you may not realize this, that this is the percentage of subject area experts teaching in California high schools. So in social studies and English, the humanities, we see roughly 80%, biology and math about 70%. And then in physics and chemistry, we see that there's a dearth of subject area experts. So that's another important role that post-secondary education can play. I know that, you know, I have a graduate degree in chemistry, but it's many years removed. I know that by working with Andy, particularly working with the Chemistry Olympiad program, it's really fostered my continued pursuit of chemistry content mastery. And that's a very important role for you as post-secondary educators. I'll push through this slide just because we're short on time. What I was pointing out here is that in our country and many of your jurisdictions, the requirements for chemistry content to teach high school chemistry are quite limited, in fact. And I won't dwell on that. I'm going to move on to some things that Andy's said to me over the years that have really, really stuck, is that students understand inherently the necessity for green chemistry. And I think in terms of maintaining their engagement and having more students engaging in chemistry beyond K-12 education, that we need to have an entry point for them. And that is their understanding that we have limited resources and we need to manage them in a sustainable way. And green chemistry, of course, which has been revealed in our study, our paper, is a great way to teach students how to solve a problem using the criteria of green chemistry principles and metrics. The other important benefit, and this is more of a factor in K-12 education, I suspect, than in post-secondary, is the focus on the affective domain rather than the cognitive domain. Students are dealing with enormous existential threat. They're into year 2 of COVID. They're hearing about microplastics and they're hearing about water scarcity, food security. That green chemistry sustainability principles provide them with a tool every day in their education, K through 12, K through 20, to affect a change or at least understand what's happening to them. And Andy, I'll throw it back to you to wrap up.
Okay, I'll try my best here. Hopefully the internet won't cut. So this is really an appeal and some actions. What we'd really like to do is think about creating a Canadian Green Chemistry Educators Network. And I know that there are a number of people on the call today who are from Canada and that are involved in mentorship and are part of networks already. Just with our connection, Ken and I, as an example, and Ken brought in the example of Jane as well, obviously at the University of Minnesota. We would love people to become regional champions and to reach out to high school teachers and to connect with them and to have them come into your colleges, your universities to collaborate when that's possible again. Ken and I presented at the STEO conference last November, the Science Teachers Association of Ontario conference, about the work that Ken has been doing at his school and the experiments that he's developed and so forth. And Ken will also be presenting next month at Ontario Tech University to Bachelor of Education students in a similar vein. So just to finish things up, on the next slide, Ken. So here are just some suggestions. And again, we acknowledge that some of you will be doing some of these things. Thinking about presenting at a K-12 education conference, perhaps signing up to be an ACS science coach, or contacting a local high school, or specifically a high school teacher, maybe that you already know, or somebody that you don't know and that you liaise with through the actual high school more broadly to start with. Inviting a teacher to attend a conference that you're going to, perhaps the BCCE or something like that. Encourage a teacher to visit your university to interact with you. And broadly contacting your university's community outreach office to see if they can lend a hand with support. There are some thank yous to certainly various people at Beyond Benign that have helped us an awful lot over the years, to Ken's High School and to the University of Toronto. And we're certainly very happy to hear from you as well today or any other time about what you're doing, ideas you have, and how we might expand networks and to move this enterprise forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Andy and Ken. I think in the interest of time, and also because I know Cassie doesn't have a lot of time, I think why don't we segue straight into the next talk, and we can save Q&A for after the break.